how you like it, yeah.
What's up, everybody, and welcome back to the Win on TV podcast. My name is Leaf. I'm your host. This is a podcast where we watch the first episode of a show and then we talk about it. Today, like I said last week, we are talking about Avatar: The Last Airbender, the animated series. If you're looking for my thoughts on the live action one, I did that last week. You can find that wherever you're listening to this, where it's Apple, Spotify, or something else. The episode should be there. But again, we are talking about the animated version of Avatar: The Last Airbender. The premise on IMDb states, in a war-torn world of elemental magic, a young boy reawakens to undertake a dangerous mystic quest to fulfill his destiny as the Avatar, spoilers, and bring peace to the world. I think that's a pretty succinct way of letting people know who haven't seen this or heard about it, just what the general idea of this show is. Now, before I get into the episode, if it's your first time here, I go beat by beat. That way you don't have to, and that way I don't forget anything. I'm going to try not to compare this to the live action one. I want to just kind of focus on this episode and then just watch it for what it is. But I might bring up the live action one. I don't know. We'll see how it goes. But we start with the intro. Water, earth, fire, air. This whoever's narrating, Katara, essentially says that her grandma told her stories that the world used to be at peace and there used to be a person named the Avatar who would keep the peace, and all of that changed when the Fire Nation attacked. This person named the Avatar knows all four of the elements, and 100 years ago they vanished when everyone needed them most. It turns out that the Fire Nation is winning the war. 2 years ago, her father and the other soldiers left to the Earth Kingdom to help fight, and they never returned, and they left her and her brother behind to take care of the village. Some believe that the Avatar wasn't reborn into the air nomads, and that the cycle is broken, but Katara thinks, you know what, I still have hope. I believe the Avatar is out there. We have that sweeping shot. Cue the fucking music. Let's go. Book 1, Water. Chapter 1, The Boy in the Iceberg. Now, we're going to pause right here. What I like about this intro, if you've seen Avatar at all, you know it's usually, water, earth, fire, air. We hit whatever the episode is called. We get into it. First episode, you get the extended version. I like that this gives just enough information that if you're brand new, which we all were at the time, but if you're watching this now, brand new, you have enough information to understand the world, but there are enough breadcrumbs for you to have questions, right? So it's like, oh, hey, there's this person in the Avatar. They know all the elements. They haven't been around when the world needed them and the Fire Nation started this war. Okay, why? What happened to the Water Tribe soldiers that left for the Earth Kingdom? Why is the Fire Nation winning this war? And then you also get this. They have this small little picture of Katara and Sokka as actual kids. Like, hey, they left these two kids in charge of this entire village, and they're just like babies. And then having the first little title card being like Book 1, Chapter 1, The Boy in the Iceberg, makes it feel like, oh, this is an actual narrative. So, like, how long is this story? Right? If you didn't know, like, how long is this story? How many chapters? How many books? So, again, just off rip, there's enough stuff to be like, okay, I understand the basics of what's going on, but there are enough little question marks to be like, all right, let me see what's going on here. We have this sweeping shot over these icebergs. This is where we first meet Sokka and Katara, who are in a boat and they're fishing. This is our first kind of view of actual bending outside the intro, where she like scoops up this fish in a water bubble and she's like, yo, look, I caught a fish. But her brother's too focused on actual like normal fishing with a spear. He accidentally pops the bubble and the fish gets away. And we already, from this, just again, the episode just started. Clearly, one knows bending and the other one doesn't. Already establishing, like, hey, not everyone has this ability. It is only some people and not other people. Sokka is like unfazed by waterbending. He thinks it's like some like woo-woo type stuff. He's like, honestly, if I knew waterbending, that weird stuff, I would keep it to myself. And then they start going back and forth. They have this nice little sibling banter, already establishing the characters and establishing more of the world. And it's only been a couple seconds. The boat gets caught in a current and It's actually pretty scary. Like, they're dodging icebergs left and right, and they just managed to like get knocked out of the boat as it's crushed between two icebergs. So it's like, it's dangerous up here. These kids should not be out here by themselves. But again, a lot of the adults left for war, so the kids are by themselves. And this is where we get a little bit of Sokka's personality, and he is sexist. He says, "Leave it to a girl to mess things up." And this ticks off Katara, rightfully so, and she gets angry and unintentionally starts waterbending behind her. During this rant, we learn that their mom has died, and we're getting more of that sibling banter. She's like, "I'm tired of doing your laundry. I'm tired of you talking to me like this." Like, just more banter. And with that last little like bit of anger, she breaks this giant iceberg behind her that crashes into the water. We see this glowing underneath them, and then suddenly this giant iceberg pops up, and it has this little boy and this creature inside of it. And what's interesting is Sokka, the, I guess, more rational one is like, "Hey, we shouldn't go." And she's like, "No, there's someone in there. We have to go help." Establishing that, like, Sokka is more of the guarded one, and Katara is more of the, not outgoing, but she's more willing to help people so far. So it's like, okay, we're getting, again, enough of these characters to kind of already establish everything. And the episode just started. Katara breaks the iceberg open, and we get a nice old sky beam. This is where we meet Zuko and his uncle Iroh. And Zuko's like, "Finally, the Avatar." And Iroh is completely unfazed. He's drinking tea. He's like, "Listen, we've been down this road before. You're always saying, that you found the Avatar. Let's chill out a little bit." And Zuko's angry, and he's like, "Everyone, set the ship over there, like, full steam ahead," establishing that Zuko is just, like, so angry and so obsessed with finding the Avatar. Aang walks out the iceberg. He's glowing, passes out. Sokka starts to poke him with the other side of his spear. Again, this is a kid show a little bit, so you get a little bit of that humor, but also again showing that Sokka is a little more guarded. He's like, "Oh, like, what's going on with this kid? What's happening here?" Aang wakes up, he sees Katara, and he's like, "I need to ask you something. Get close to my face." And he's like, "You want to go penguin swimming with me?" And it's like, what the? And then he's like, "Wait, hold on, I don't know what's going on." He goes to wake up Appa. The two other ones are freaked out. They've never seen a sky bison before. Appa sneezes on Sokka, and he's covered in snot. Again, kid show, so you get some of these like little childish moments. Aang sneezes, he flies up, comes back down. They're like, "You're an airbender?" And he's like, "Oh, yeah, I'm an airbender." He's like, "If you guys are stuck, I can give you a ride home." Katara's like, "Yeah, sure." Sokka's like, "No." And she's like, "Okay, you can swim back if you want." And he's like, "Oh, fine." And this is where Aang's like, "Appa, yep, he's gonna fly us over to the village." And then Appa, like, just jumps and then falls right into the water and just starts swimming. And Aang's like, he's tired. I promise you can fly. And Sokka's like, "Yeah, sure, okay." So again, like I was saying, already establishing this, like, the world of like, hey, there's this thing there, Aang is an airbender. There's these thing called sky bison. Apparently they can fly, but we haven't seen Appa fly, so you gotta assume it's gonna happen. But again, just showing that little bit of that mystery there. And as they're floating along this river, or the ocean, I guess you would say, Aang is just staring at Katara, and she's like, "Why are you staring at me?" And he's like, "Oh, was I?" And he's like, he's such a little kid. We cut back to Zuko and Iroh. Iroh's like, "All right, Zuko, I'm gonna go to bed," and Zuko's just like staring. He's just like, "Finally, the Avatar." Like, he doesn't say it, but you can feel it. He's like, "Finally, the fucking Avatar, man." And Iroh's like, "Listen, you have to, like, get some sleep. Your entire family," he's like, "your father, your grandfather, even your great-grandfather have been tracking down the Avatar." He's like, "You gotta chill, like, you gotta get some sleep." And Zuko's like, "My entire honor hangs on catching the Avatar." And it's like, oh, I don't know what that means, right? But again, we're setting up these little nuggets of questions. But all you can really tell right now is that Zuko's angry, and he is full-on determined to catch the Avatar for whatever reason. As they're floating back to the village, Katara asks if Aang knows the Avatar. He gets a little weird. He's like, oh, I don't know the Avatar, but I know some friends who happen to know the Avatar. And then she's like, oh, okay. And she goes to sleep, and he, like, turns away and makes, like, a really awkward face. So you can tell, like, Aang's hiding something, but it's like, why is he hiding something? Are you the Avatar, Aang? I don't know. So something is going on. Aang has a nightmare. He is in a storm with Appa. They are actually flying in the sky. They are plunged into the water. They start to drown. Aang suddenly starts to glow, and he, like, makes this ice sphere around them that Katara and Sokka find him in. So it feels more of a memory and less of an actual nightmare, but it's presented as a nightmare. So again, more of these interesting questions that's like, what's going on here? But not enough to distract you away from the main story. It only adds on to what you're watching. Aang wakes up and they are back in the village. Katara introduces him to everyone. Everyone's a little scared and freaked out. They're like, what the hell? This is where we meet Gran, their grandmother, and she's like, yo, no one's seen an airbender in 100 years. We thought your entire kind was extinct. And he's like, what? And during this, Sokka grabs Aang's glider, and he's like, what kind of weapon is this? This is just a stick. And Aang's like, this isn't a weapon. It's it helps me fly through the sky. And then Sokka's like, people don't fly. Aang's like, all right, let me show you real quick. So he starts flying around. He's showing off. Everyone's all excited. He crashes into Sokka's watchtower. Sokka is upset. He gets hit with a big old thing of snow. And he's like, why don't you and Katara and her waterbending go, like, bend somewhere else or whatever? And this is where Katara has a little conversation with Gran, and she's like, I'm really hoping that Aang is somehow able to teach me waterbending. And Gran's like, maybe not put all your hope in this boy. And Katara's like, listen, I think he has a lot to offer. And we cut back to Aang, and he is sticking his tongue to his glider, and it's now stuck. Like when kids stick their tongue to a pole, like in A Christmas Story. What I like about this, I mean, not trying to spoil the future, but, with the original premise and kind of what's setting up already, is that, Aang is the Avatar. It's the one who's supposed to bring peace, and constantly, he's shown as just a little kid. Like, he wants to go penguin sledding, he's sticking his tongue to his pole, he's flying around showing off, and, he's like, oogling at Katara. He's just a little kid, But anyways, we cut back to Zuko. He is running drills against these two soldiers while his uncle watches. And his uncle's like, no, you're doing it wrong. Firebending comes from your breath. It's not about, flexing your muscles. And Zuko's like, listen, I already know the basics. Teach me more. And Iroh's like, no, you don't know the basics. Like, we're going to run it again. Zuko gets pissed. He knocks down one of the soldiers. And he's like, listen, uncle, the Avatar hasn't been seen in 100 years. He's supposed to know all the elements, and he's probably good at fighting. He's like, I need to know more than the basics, or else, I'm like, my ass kicked. So he's like, teach me more. And his uncle's like, oh, fine. He's like, all right, but I'm going to eat this duck first. And he starts just slamming duck. Something I found interesting about this moment is it could be simply written off as, and again, another moment for kids because this is a kid show. But the other added element, I feel like, to this scene, as opposed to, on top of the one we had earlier, is the fact that Iroh seems to be just kind of like along for the ride. Like, Zuko so far is just pissed and determined to find the Avatar, but Iroh's like drinking tea and he's eating duck. He's just kind of like, here, I'm here to help you out, but like, I'm not really not, into it like that in terms of like finding the Avatar. And he's also Zuko's opposite, where Zuko so far is just absolutely pissed all the time, where his uncle is just chilling. He's just chilling. So again, a small moment that could be written off, but I think it's really establishing more of like the uncle's part on this ship. But we cut back to Sokka, and he is addressing the troops. When we cut to the troops, they're literal toddlers. They're like 3 or 4 years old. One's like, I gotta pee. And Sokka's like, we're supposed to be like, ready for anything to go down. Anyone else have to pee? And they all have to pee. And it's just like, it's like, these aren't soldiers. These are babies. Aang shows up and he starts messing around. And then Sokka's like, listen, this is a place for warriors, so you're not supposed to be here. But then the kids start playing with the snow because Aang is like not antagonizing, but he's encouraging them to just have fun. And Sokka's like, don't you know there's a war going on? Like, I have to make sure that everyone's ready. Aang's like, what war are you talking about? And then before Sokka could explain anything, he sees a penguin, and Aang is just like, I gotta go catch that penguin. We cut to Aang trying to catch a penguin. Katara comes over, and she's like, listen, I'll help you catch a penguin if you teach me how to waterbend. And Aang's like, sorry, I'm an airbender. I don't know how to teach you waterbending. He's like, is there no one else that can teach you here? And we learned that Katara is the only waterbender in the South Pole. And he's like, okay, well, what about the North Pole? And she's like, well, we haven't talked to our, cousins or, just our other tribe up in the North for a long time. Aang's like, all right, well, I have, Appa, and he can fly, so I could just fly you up to the North, and then you can learn waterbending. And this is where we learned, well, Katara's never left home. So she's like, I don't know if I could just, leave and travel to the other side of the world. And he's like, all right, well, like, think about it. And, I'll be able to do that for you. Katara is like, all right. And she teaches him how to catch a penguin. The two of them go penguin sledding. Katara's like, I haven't done this since I was a kid. And Aang is like, you still are a kid. And as someone who had to grow up fast, not putting too much personal information out there, but I kind of felt that, where you start to become a teenager and you're like, I think I have everything figured out. And it's like, no, you're still a child. Like, relax. They're sledding along. They get off their little penguins. They find a Fire Navy ship. Katara's like, hey, we're not supposed to go in there. It could be trapped. Aang's like, listen, if you're going to be a bender, you have to let go of fear. And it's like, oh, okay. See if that comes back later. So they go inside. They're looking around. They find this room full of weapons. Aang is just kind of having like a crisis where he's like, I don't understand like what's happening. I've never heard of this war. I have had friends all around the world in all, regions of bending. Like, what the hell is going on? And Katara's like, well, this ship is from the first attack back like 100 years ago, and this war has been 100 years. She's like, maybe you've been in an iceberg for like 100 years. And it, of course, like, slams him into the, emotionally, because he's like, 100, like, how do you conceptualize the fact of like waking up and it's 100 years later? It's not too deep of him like, wallowing or anything, but it is a moment of just like, damn, like 100 years, like, what am I even supposed to say that? And they move. Aang accidentally trips a trap, which shoots a flare up into the sky. Zuko sees it, and he sees Aang and Katara like running away from the ship, and then he sees the village, and he can't really make out Aang. Like, he can see him hopping around, but he can't like see Aang in detail. So he's like, oh, the Avatar moves pretty spry for 112 years old, not knowing that he's a kid. So it's like, oh, okay, he's clearly gonna learn that he's a kid. And then it goes to be continued, and I was like, oh, that's it? That's it for this episode? Holy shit. And I contemplated watching, because I'm sure, when this first aired, it probably aired in like, 2 parts, more of like a movie. But the whole point of my podcast is just to watch the first episode. So having watched this first episode and then it was like to be continued, I was like, oh snap, that's like, you're gonna leave me on a cliffhanger of like Zuko going to the village to catch the Avatar? And that's it. That's the first episode, everybody. So if it's your first time here, I have a 3-point rating scale. It is 1 and done, give it a chance, and I'm in. I'm in. Alright? I'm full on in. I've already watched all of Avatar. I need to rewatch it. I was really busy, so I'm still only on book 1 on like, because I have all the Blu-ray, I have the Blu-ray collection. So I am on, I think each book is 3 discs. So I'm on disc 2 of book 1. So I'm fully invested in rewatching it. But what I loved about this first episode, again, is all of the questions that it gives you, as well as doing this nice world building. And I like establishing the characters. Aang is clearly just this kid who wakes up in a world he doesn't understand, but is so childish in the way that he always finds fun, right? Like, he wants to go penguin sledding, he wants to show off, he's, oogling at Katara because she's a girl and he thinks she's cute. He doesn't say that, but you can tell the vibes, you know what I mean? You got the Katara, who's hopeful and she wants to help people, and you got Sokka, who's like, I gotta be the strong warrior and I'm a man and blah blah blah, and you get this small little village, you know what I mean? Like, you're understanding the world, and it's clearly bigger because there are these different nations and they already set up like, hey, there's other bending and stuff, and clearly Aang was like, hey, I'll take you up north, so there's the promise of a potential adventure. And then you have the looming threat of Zuko, who we only meet in a couple scenes, but he's so determined to capture that avatar. And again, it ends on the cliffhanger of him being like, oh, that's where you've been hiding, in that little village, huh? Again, as I was saying at the end, he doesn't know that the Avatar is just a kid, probably younger than him, honestly, just by the way they're drawn. He thinks the Avatar is this full-on, like, trained master in all the elements. So you have all of these questions, and it's just like, all right, like, what's going on? What is this world about? I'm super intrigued, and again, having it be book 1, episode, like, chapter 1, is like, all right, cool, they're presenting this as a story, as a novel, as a book. So you gotta assume there's way more going on. And of course, if it's the Avatar and they need to master the 4 elements, and Aang is the Avatar and he only knows airbending, you have to assume that he has to try to learn the other ones, right? So yeah, there's way more mystery in this first episode than I remember. And again, just really that cliffhanger, like, threw me for a loop of to be continued. I was like, oh shit, I gotta watch the next one. Even though I already know what's going on. So I am gonna just talk about the whole thing. No spoilers if you somehow haven't seen Avatar. You should do yourself a service. Go watch Avatar. It's just the world building, and all the characters are awesome. Some of the character arcs are amazing, specifically with Zuko. Again, no spoilers. It's just a great show. I mean, honestly, I give this a 10 out of 10. It's one of my favorite shows of, like, all time. I do have one issue with the entire series. So this is the one spoiler. So if you haven't seen Avatar, you should probably leave. I appreciate your time. Come see me next week. I'm gonna watch Mr. and Mrs. Smith. But if you're going to stay, I'm going to get into spoilers. This one spoiler in 3, 2. So the one issue I've always had with Avatar is the lion turtle. Aang doesn't want to kill nobody. All the avatars, even the other air avatars, like, yo, you gotta kill the Fire Lord. That's the only way to save the world. And he's like, I can't do it. And it's like, Aang, you just gotta catch one body one time. He runs into the lion turtle, which we've never heard of as far as I know. Some people might be like, oh, there's a comic book or whatever. No. I'm talking simply in the show. No one's ever been like, hey, there's a lion turtle and knows this magic power. And he just taps Aang on the forehead and he's like, yep, now you know how to take people's powers away. And it's so ex machina. It's crazy. And if you don't know what ex machina means, it just means divine intervention. So it's so divine that it's, like, unfair, in my opinion, especially because you had Aang, who had to meet the guru to try to understand the avatar state and try to really master it. So to have this extreme power of taking people's literal bending away, it's like taking away someone's, like, one of the senses by just, like, you can just, the power, you can take away one of their 5 senses and just, like, tapping them on the forehead and being like, well, you know how to do it now. It's like, what? If I was able to rewrite this, I'm not a writer. I'm not saying this would be better. In my version, because Aang has the avatar state, he has the power of all the avatars ever. You're telling me not one of these motherfuckers knows how to blood bend? And you might be like, oh, it's the full moon. He's the avatar, okay? You know what I mean? I would have had him bloodbend the Fire Lord, make sure his head is up, that way he can't fire breathe on him, and be like, Avatar Ozai, in the Avatar voice, Avatar Ozai, I'm going to hold you all day and night until this comet passes, and then, this is how I will bring peace. I will not take your life. I will hold you for as long as possible, and when all is said and done, you will be put in jail. And then when his friends show up, they can find him still glowing in the avatar state, holding Ozai in place until everyone comes around so that they can have the power to overpower him when the comet passes. Because again, I don't like the idea of being like, boom, here's the power that you needed. All right, peace. And then having him just have this insane power from out of nowhere. Like, it doesn't make sense to me. But again, Avatar is a 10 out of 10. All right. So the one small gripe I have against the entire series. So take that with a grain of salt, if you will. I could give a whole episode of me just talking about things I like about Avatar, but I'm going to leave it at that. If you're still here, thank you for listening to me ramble. Again, next week, I will be talking about Mr. and Mrs. Smith, the Amazon series with like Donald Glover. So the TV show, Mr. and Mrs. Smith. I will be talking about that first episode. If you want to keep up with me, you can follow me on Twitter at Little Leafers. Other than that, that is it. I will see you next time. Peace.